Hello everybody, the Bearded Prepper here. Thank you for joining me again. I wanted to round out this series on basic needs with series number 3. If you remember correctly, we spoke about protection, safety in session 1, and then in session 2 we talked about food and water. So if you haven't seen those, I encourage you to go back and check those out just to get the whole picture. Again, this channel is all about using common sense in this illogical world to make sure that we are preparing for the worst case scenario, or just for peace of mind to know that we're prepared in the event that we need to be a little more self-reliant. So let's talk about shelter in this series. You know, when you think about shelter, you think, oh, you know, I've got my place or whatever, especially if you own. And if things get really bad, it's not like someone's going to be coming around to kick me out probably or whatever. But, you know, we're going to look at this tonight in terms of, do you rent or do you own? Because the assessment and the way you respond in those two situations have a lot of similarities, but also there are some differences there we want to explore as well. So first, we'll talk about whether, for the people that own your property or in the process of purchasing the property through mortgage or whatever. And if you are still in the process of purchasing and you have a mortgage, that's something to consider. You know, what if your income or your primary source of income is disrupted for whatever reason? There are a lot of layoffs happening. There are a lot of companies just closing up shop. Some industries, just with the stroke of a pen from our legislative branch, can wipe out your whole industry temporarily or permanently. So these are some things to consider when you are thinking about your shelter if you don't own it outright. And even if you do own it, you still have to pay taxes, etc. So those are some considerations to think about, especially as you are considering financial preparations for any kind of period of difficulty or disruption in your income, etc. So as you're thinking about your property, you've got your nice house that you live in, and you know, you need to think about, what would things look like if I went an extended period of time without utilities, things of that nature, electricity, public gas, water, things of that nature. Certainly sewage and things of that nature would be secondary to the others, because it would take a while for that to probably completely fail over water towers emptying or electricity not working, things like that. So you know, consider that. What would it look like if you had to do without utilities for 1 to 6 months? That's a good place to start. If you can make it 6 months, you can probably adjust your lifestyle to make it without utilities, barring you know, wintertime, things of that nature. But so you really should look at your environment where you live and make a list of strengths and weaknesses or threats. You know, what strengths do you have there in place? Do you have a wood stove in place? Do you have a lot of space around so that you have good line of sight around your property? Things of that nature. What weaknesses or what threats do you have? Meaning, your only source of heat and cooking may be electric. That's a problem. If you have no electricity, you can't cook, you can't heat. And while we're talking about heat, you know, that's really one of the primary concerns. Granted, it's not fun to make it through you know, the summertime without air conditioning these days. I mean, people did it for generations. There's ways to make it work. But what would you do without heat in the wintertime? Do you have the capabilities of heating your residence, your shelter, with wood? If that's the case, where are you going to get your wood? Do you have wood on hand? What's your plan for that? In addition, how are you going to cook? Are you going to cook with wood? If you don't have gas, do you have the capabilities of cooking with propane? Most of us have a grill, maybe a propane grill, that could get you by in a very short, temporary time frame. But you know, you can't really cook everything on that. think about, and those little gas bottles won't last that long. So think about something a little more efficient, like, should I go out and buy a camp stove, 2-burner camp stove, 1-burner camp stove, things of that nature. You can get propane, butane stoves pretty inexpensively. If you're not an outdoors person or family and you don't go camping, so you don't have that already, you might want to consider having it just in case. Get some bottles, some small bottles of propane to go with it, or butane, whatever it takes. Also, there are other options like, there is cooking on wood. That's a possibility, but you've got to consider doing that year round. You're not, if you have a wood stove in your house, you're not going to be using that in the summertime. You could certainly fix something up to do outdoor cooking, but it's a possibility, but it's not as convenient, at least in the 1 to 6 month time frame that I'm talking about. Or if it's just an extended disruption because of a natural disaster, things like that. You don't want to have to count on being out in the yard to cook with wood heat necessarily, especially if it's inclement weather or unsafe zone otherwise. So think about that, and also think about the basics such as laundry. How are you going to do laundry if you don't have utilities for an extended period? How are you going to clean your home? I mean, sanitation is pretty important. You don't want to live in an unsanitary condition. That's how disease starts and spreads. It just makes it worse. Anything you can do, like living in a sanitary environment or having the ability to clean, will help your mental state in times of getting by during disasters or whatever the case may be. Think about having things on hand like vinegar. Distilled vinegar is a great cleaning agent. Bleach. Now be careful if you use bleach for sterilizing water and things of that nature. You have to get bleach without any additives, or else you'll be consuming chemicals. So look at the ingredient list if you're going to do that. I recommend just having straight bleach that you can dilute or use for other purposes also. But pay attention to those ingredient list on the bleach bottles and on vinegar as well. I saw vinegar today that was labeled as cleaning vinegar and had all kind of things in it. So pay attention to that. In addition, you can use vinegar for other homeopathic remedies, whether it be fungal type issues and things of that nature also. So those are some things to think about as you are looking at shelter and how you're going to exist. So let's flip the script a little bit and consider those that are renting. How long can you stay in your residence, in your shelter, if your ability to pay rent, if your income is disrupted? How long can you get by, or how can you save up and prepare for 1, 2, 3 months of rent? Economic planning, whether you're owning or renting, is an important thing. And there's lots of people out there. I know there's one guy that I've watched some called the Economic Prepper. Talks a lot about that. Another guy, Southern Prepper 1, is really a good, well-rounded channel to watch also. He has a lot of different things, and he brings boots on the ground, which is actual reports from different areas, people emailing him directly, giving him reports of what they're seeing out in the public. So you can keep tabs on what's happening in other areas or what trends are coming your way, just by checking out some things like that. But being prepared financially is part of the prepper life. You want to make sure that you can survive for a short term, if no matter what happens. Think about the same as what I talked about for those that owned their home, without utilities. How long can you make it safely? Or how long can you survive and still meet your essential needs without utilities, electricity, water, gas, things of that nature? Do you have a backup plan? How could you cook without electricity or gas? Also, make the same list of threats and strengths for your area, for your residents, and kind of plan around that. You may come up with some things that you never thought about before. So Same thing as far as sanitation. What is your plan for that? You need to include some of that in your preps, things of that nature. So here's one idea for heat. Heat is a big thing because people freeze to death. I live on the eastern seaboard in an area that it's not uncommon for us to get multiple days below freezing, without getting above freezing for days on end. So if you live in an area like that or even colder, one thing you can think about, some alternatives, is identify a warm space in your shelter, in your residence. Do you have a basement? If you have a basement, that's great, because basements stay warmer. If they're underground, they stay fairly constant year round, so you don't have to worry about heat as much. In the summertime especially, that's really great because you can go to a basement and cool off and sleep in a cool place, as long as it's sanitary and there's not a lot of mold or things like that to make you sick. In addition, if you seal off one room, let's say you just take blankets or plastic. Plastic's believe it or not, it's a great insulator, because you can tape plastic down with duct tape or something and there's very little airflow. So while it may not insulate because of thickness, it will hold air in. So you can designate one room in your shelter as a warm room if you can have some alternative source of heat. Now, let me caution you with this. There are a lot of people that are going to think, oh, I'll just get one of these little, golf heaters or propane heaters or a portable propane heater, and I can function without electricity and keep the space warm. But if you seal off a room, or if you go indoors and start burning unvented propane, you're probably going to die. Carbon monoxide is going to build up. You're going to go to sleep and you're never going to wake up, you or your family. So know what you're doing when it comes to propane and things like this. But there are other alternatives. You can watch some YouTube videos on using terracotta pots and even tea light candles to make a small heater that'll heat a space. It may not get it toasty warm and comfortable, but it'll keep it warm enough in a smaller space that's sealed off that you can survive well and put on some sweaters or keep warm. So explore those thoughts when it comes to staying warm in your residence if you have a disruption in utilities, especially in the winter or sometime like that. So again, think about how are you going to clean, do laundry, things of that nature. And if you're renting, especially if you're renting in a populated area, or if you own your home in a populated area, again, think worst case scenario. What if things are really unsafe here? What if people are taking from others? What if there are people roving around, banding together and looting or kicking the door in, things like that on other places? And, again, make friends with like-minded people in your area. Have a network of people that are keeping each other informed and that have each other's back. What is your secondary plan? Are you going to circle the wagon somewhere in a central location and work together to protect what you have? I recommend having a secondary fallback location in mind, an idea, no matter what time of the year it is, what season it is, that you can fall back and have a safer space to evacuate your primary shelter and still have some ability to shelter in that secondary location, stay warm and dry, even if it's temporary until things can cool down or whatever, or till you can figure out the next step. So those are a lot of the primary things you want to think about when it comes to shelter. I mean, it's not just having a sound shelter and having a dry roof over your head. You've got to stay warm. You've got to be able to cook. You've got to be able to live. You've got to have sanitation. We didn't even talk about what are you going to do without running water or access to volumes of water to flush toilets. I mean, that's something to consider. So you have to maintain sanitation, especially if you're living in a populated area. So anyway, most importantly, the most important prep you can do, pray for wisdom and knowledge. The Lord will provide for his those that belong to him, for his followers, for his children. It's the most important thing you can do. He is the author of wisdom and knowledge. Seek it from him. He'll provide it to you. And just think through these things, mull them over, make some list, maybe even do some dry runs. If you're serious about it, take a weekend and try to live as though you didn't have the utilities and comfort. Even if you keep everything going, you know, like your freezers and all that. Live without lights, you know, don't use your modern convenience to cook. Practice, see how you can do. That's how you will really find a lot of your the chinks in your armor, the weak spots, if you will, in your plan. As for me and my family, we are about to have a really good test. We're going to go on a trip internationally to a third world country and spend a lot of days in a row, and it's going to be a place without the modern convenience, where we are the outsider, and we're going to be able to really test a lot of our ability to cope with new and unfamiliar and stressful environments without the conveniences we're used to, and be able to get by as though we had lost a lot of the comforts, if you will, that we have here. We'll also be able to converse and study and get to know some people that do live truly like they are surviving hand to mouth, day to day, and have for generations. So it's a really good opportunity for us. I'm going to try to capture a lot of video while I'm there. If I can gain access to the internet somehow while I'm there, I'll try to upload some videos to the channel. Maybe you can follow along as we go. If not, then you'll have lots of content when I get back. So if I go idle for a number of days and you don't hear from me in the very near future, you'll know that I'm immersed and moving around in an area that can give us a lot of experience. So I'll try to capture as much content as I can, just to kind of give you a feel for it and let you maybe experience that with us. So until next time, God bless. I'm the Bearded Prepper, signing off.